My name is Hans Zimmer. I have for years lived in a cesspool called Hollywood, and I keep knocking out movie scores one after the other because I keep having new ideas. And that's what I do, and that's what I've done all my life, and I hope I carry on doing it. I think my experience with the film originally was they were shooting in Chicago, and I think they just started shooting, and I got a phone call from Ron or his producer, Richard Lewis, that said, would I come to Chicago and look at something? And I went there, and I don't think they had actually started doing anything yet. Really, all they had was some stock footage of fire, and they put a piece of Black Rain against it. And Ron kept saying, in the nice, quiet, subtle way he says it, I think this is really emotional. And I think this is sort of the thing we should do. So now, fast forward 2 years later, I'm sitting in front of the film, I'm sitting in front of the fires, and Ron keeps saying, no, make the fires more emotional. And I keep, turning up, the VP strings, thinking, he can't mean this, because I completely forgot about that thing he showed me in Chicago. And we nearly got completely derailed there for a second. There were quite a few moments where we got nearly completely derailed. It was I don't know, I think the forces were against me. Like, for instance, the first set of tunes I wrote, I had to go out to New York to play him, and he, myself, and Brian Grazer are in this limo, and I can't remember where we're going, but we're going somewhere, and Ron goes, oh, you got those tunes on you? And I'm going, yeah, I got them on a cassette. Oh, look, there's a cassette player in the limo. So I bung the tunes in there, bung the cassette in there, and the cassette player instantly eats the tape, So it's like, oh, well, that's the only copy I had. Well, I might have to go all the way back to get the, So that was sort of a bit of a wasted trip. But I couldn't make head or tail of what he was saying to me for the longest time. And that we had a music supervisor called Becky Mancuso, who literally one night, I think Ron had phoned her, at 3 o'clock in the morning, going, Hans doesn't seem to get what I mean. Literally turned up in her, in her nightie with a raincoat over it, and said, now, dear, let me talk to you about, what Ron means. Let me be the translator, because maybe it was me being European or whatever. He's the only director where we were forever talking past each other. And then, like the first big fire sequence, I remember this thing going on about it. It's not emotional, and it was like 250 bars long or so. And finally, I remembered this Black Rain thing. And that's Becky came over at 3 in the morning. I said, you remember that thing you watched with the Black Rain thing? And the Black Rain thing, which I had actually thought wasn't that emotional, was just very straight and classical. That's what Ron had thought was emotional. So all I did in this 250 bar thing, I changed 13 bars, I remember. And it went from, you're fired, to, oh, this is great, So much so that, last year or so, we actually thought of working together again. We sort of got over it. But no, I think, plus, I am difficult because, I will go and say, well, why can't we try this? Why don't we go over here? Just when somebody says everything is all right, I have to go off and come up with some ridiculous different idea and throw it all, throw everything that we had away. And I think a bit of that was happening too. Or just things not written until, major things left unwritten until the very last moment. It was one of my early Hollywood epics, and I think Hollywood wasn't quite ready for the complete anarchy and messiness. I knew the main theme was relatively good. I thought it was okay. Now everybody thinks. I mean, people whose opinion I really value, like John Powell. Whenever I'm like really down on myself, he goes, "Oh no, but what about that Backdraft tune? That's pretty good." At the time, I was always thinking, oh, maybe I need to do better. Maybe I need to do better. That's why, in a way, it's a very confusing score. because it never quite sits still with its themes. Plus, there was like a big, well, it's a tiny intellectual thought, but it seemed like a big thought to me at the time that, there was the brothers theme, and then there was the fireman's theme, and right at the end of it, it would all come together in a great counterpoint, sort of symphonic, whatever. I was young, you're pretentious when you're young. One thing which I thought was really cool about it was, I don't know, we were sitting in some restaurant and talking about, who our influences are. And I said, well, one of the first jobs I ever had was for George Martin. And they all went, "Who, George Martin? Do you mean the Beatles, George Martin?" I said, "Yeah, And Richard said, do you think he'd come in and mix the score?" I said, "Well, I can give him a ring." I phoned him and said, "George, fancy a bit of sunshine." I think it was the middle of winter, and in London, fancy mixing the score for me. He said, "Sure, dear boy, I'll be right over." And that was great. George came over. I'd go over to where he's mixing. I'd say, but George, like my mini moog thing, I don't hear it. In fact, I think you forgot to put it in. He goes, "Yes, it's better like that." Okay, it's like, that sort of stuff is great. It's like, he came at it with a point of view, and I was never going to argue with him about it. Nor was anybody else, of course. The action was so hard. It's just action, I think, is always hard, especially. After I did Black Rain, I thought I developed a really cool and interesting action style, which I should move forward on and carry on developing. And I thought, this is my style, right? That's what I can do. What I didn't know was that as soon as a movie like that comes out, everybody else copies your style. Hey, if you do something new, you're going to find it in 75 movies that come after you. So by the time you want to go and actually use your own style again and sort of develop it a bit, you can't do it because it's like old hat, because it really is old hat, because everybody else has been cribbing from it. So, God, you see, I don't think I'm that good at action. I've done a lot of action-y movies. I think I'm really bad at it. I think like Alan Silvestri is amazing at it. Predator or those sort of scores, or Jerry Goldsmith, or any of those guys, or John Williams. I think they're amazing at it. I think I'm really bad at it. I suppose that's why occasionally I take on another action movie, because I want to see if I can't get a bit better at it. What really was helpful on Backdraft was the sound design team up at Skywalker. They were so great. They would phone me and say, "Well, this is what we're doing here," or they'd send things over. Because part of the thing is it's this sort of eternal battle between sound design and music, usually in these action scenes. And we actually, I think we had a really easy dub because everybody knew their place. This is where Hans can make noise. This is where the Gary, from Skywalker can make noise. And they were really responsible. If they had room tones and stuff, as they'd go, our room tones are in F sharp, and you'd go, "Oh, right, okay." So you'd know which bits to, which keys to write in. That was great. I remember what I enjoyed writing were the sort of emotional bits. I remember, and I remember absolutely hating writing the action-y bits. Absolutely. I still remember that I had a 24-minute cue in this thing, which went across reels, and I still remember what the tempo of the last bar before it changes reel was, because you didn't want it to sort of in the next reel, you didn't want it to feel like you'd lost your tempo or something like that.